Welcome to Trend Vibe, where facts meet the trending edge. Real stories, viral truths, and elite updates in seconds. Stay sharp. Stay trending. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett was humiliated in public, dismissed by staff, and treated like a problem until the retired federal judge she married walked through the doors and flipped the script. Jasmine Crockett didn't have the luxury of slowing down. Not that day. She'd been running on fumes for 3 weeks straight: committee meetings in Sacramento, a policy roundtable in San Antonio, and a last-minute town hall in Tulsa. Her carry-on had barely been unpacked between stops. But today wasn't about politics. Today was personal. She arrived at Dallas Love Field just past 6:30 in the morning. Her cousin Devin had passed. He was only 42. Liver failure. She'd grown up with him like a brother. Skipping the funeral wasn't an option. No matter how tired she felt, or how little sleep she'd gotten wearing a simple black dress under her blazer, Jasmine moved with quiet urgency through the terminal. She clutched a coffee in one hand, phone in the other, scanning emails from her assistant, while walking toward the Southwest check-in desk. Her flight to Jackson, Mississippi was scheduled to board at 7:10. The first sign of trouble was the look, not the kind that lasts long, just a flicker. The young man behind the counter glanced up from his screen, then back down, then smirked slightly. Jasmine knew that look. She'd been dealing with it her entire career. She handed over her boarding confirmation and ID. "I am on flight 2376 to Jackson. I'd like to check my carry-on." The agent tapped a few keys, then frowned. You're not in the system." Jasmine stayed calm. "That can't be right. I checked in an hour ago here." She handed over her phone. "Boarding pass is right here." He glanced at the screen, then back at her. "Well, there's been a change. Your seat's been reassigned. You'll have to wait." "Reassigned to what?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and waved toward someone else behind the desk. "Hey, can you come? Take a look at this." Jasmine glanced at the clock. 6:43. Her heart started to tap faster in her chest, but her voice stayed level. "Can you just tell me what the issue is?" "I have a funeral to attend." The second employee arrived, barely sparing her a glance. "She's flagged for random review." She said flatly, "We're going to need to recheck your credentials." Jasmine blinked. "Excuse me, it's routine." "No, it's not. I've taken this route 4 times this year. This has never happened." The first agent stood. "Ma'am, if you don't calm down, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside." Jasmine raised her eyebrows. "Calm down. I'm asking a question." "That's enough, please. Stand over there." Passengers behind her had started to pay attention. Phones were in hand. Someone whispered, "That's Congresswoman Crockett." But that didn't seem to matter here. Jasmine stepped aside, jaw locked. She pulled out her government ID. "I'm not hiding anything. I'm on official travel." They barely looked at the badge. The second agent said, "ID doesn't override protocol." A sharp, sinking feeling ran through her gut. Something wasn't right. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was personal. Still, she kept her voice. I'll cooperate with whatever's required. But I'd like to speak to a supervisor." That was when the first agent motioned to someone out of view and said, "Security, please." But Jasmine hadn't raised her voice, hadn't broken any rules. And now she was being treated like a threat. Jasmine stood quietly near the end of the counter. Arms crossed, eyes fixed on a stain in the carpet beneath her feet. It was the kind of moment that demanded stillness, not weakness. She wasn't about to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. She could feel the passengers behind her, looking, some whispering. Others recording discreetly behind raised phones. One woman made eye contact and mouth. "I'm sorry." Jasmine gave her a quick nod. She appreciated it, but sympathy wasn't going to fix this. 2 TSA officers walked up, not rushed, not calm either. That in-between pace that always came with a suspicion that had already been decided. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," 1 of them said. "For what?" Jasmine asked. not moving. Her voice was clear. Not loud, random review. Please don't make this more difficult than it has to be. She slowly held out her boarding pass and ID again. I've already checked in. This is an official government trip. That's a real badge. There's no issue here, except the one you're creating. The officer didn't look at the ID. He didn't even ask a follow-up, ma'am, please. He repeated, we're not asking there. It was the quiet threat. Jasmine glanced over at the gate screen flight. 2376 was still on time. Boarding started in 10 minutes. She thought about her mother waiting in Jackson, already texting her where to sit. She thought about Devon's little girl, who had asked if Auntie Jazz would say something at the service. She closed her eyes for a second. Inhaled, then walked with the officers. They led her away from the crowd through a side door near the edge of the gate terminal. The hallway was quiet. Fluorescent lights flickered faintly overhead. A third agent met them halfway and said something in hushed tones that Jasmine couldn't hear. The officers nodded and turned to her again. We'll need to do a full pat-down. One of them said, also your bag will be screened. No warrant, no probable cause, no explanation. She said softly, you're walking a line, you're not trained to cross. One of them replied, you can file a complaint later. Jasmine didn't speak after that. She stood with her arms out, letting them pat her down with cold efficiency. Her bag was opened, her toiletries pulled out. Her files shuffled. No one explained anything. 10 minutes passed, then 15. She finally broke the silence. Can someone please explain the reassignment? Why I was pulled? One of the agents finally glanced up. Ma'am, I don't handle seating, that's airline. We were called because you were being difficult. Difficult? Her voice finally cracked. I asked the question. I didn't yell, I didn't resist. I complied with everything you said. He shrugged. We respond to what we're told. That's our job. Jasmine looked at her watch. 7:16. Her flight had already left the gate for a moment. She said nothing. Then she sat down in the cold metal chair against the wall. Her hands rested on her knees. Eyes locked forward. She wasn't just missing a flight. Now she was missing a funeral. She was missing a promise. She was being punished in plain view for nothing. One of the TSA officers stepped outside to make a call. The other leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, avoiding eye contact. Jasmine took her phone out and sent one message. I was pulled. I missed the flight. I need you here. She hit send and waited. But the next person who walked through those doors wouldn't ask questions the same way Jasmine had. He wouldn't need to. Franklin Rhodes had always walked with quiet authority. He didn't need attention to know his presence was felt 30 years on the bench. Taught him that tone often mattered more than volume. Still, when his wife texted him just 3 words, I need you, something in his chest tightened. He was already in the car, not far from the terminal. Jasmine had insisted he didn't come inside earlier. Said it was a short flight, nothing to worry about, but something had gone wrong. And when she said, need, she meant now. Back inside the terminal, Jasmine sat alone. The TSA officers had moved a few steps away, now whispering among themselves while trying not to glance in her direction. Her bag was half-zipped. Her paperwork scattered back into it without care. She had repacked it slowly on her own as they watched. Her blazer was wrinkled, her hair, once neatly pinned, now fell in loose curls around her face. She looked composed, but beneath it a quiet fire was burning. The same airline agent who'd flagged her earlier now stood near the corner of the hallway, arms crossed, eyes on the floor, like he was waiting for this part to just be over. The one who called security hadn't come back at 7:36. The automatic doors are opened. Franklin stepped in, wearing a dark gray coat, black slacks, and a maroon scarf that Jasmine had bought him last Christmas. His walk was measured, His eyes sharp, Jasmine stood when she saw him. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. He looked around at the agents, the officers, the mess on the table. Then he looked at his wife. "Are you okay?" She nodded once he turned to the closest TSA officer who's in charge here. The man hesitated. "Sir, can I ask who you are?" "I'm Franklin Rhodes, retired federal judge 9th Circuit, who's in charge." The officer blinked, caught off guard. One moment." Franklin turned to Jasmine. "What happened?" "I questioned a change in my seat. They said I was disruptive. I showed ID. They didn't care. Then I missed my flight." "Did you raise your voice?" "No, make a scene." "No." The officer came back, now accompanied by a supervisor with a lanyard and walkie-talkie. The supervisor extended a hand, halfway Judge Rhodes. We were unaware of." Franklin didn't take the hand. "Why was my wife's seat reassigned? I'd have to check with the gate." Then check. The supervisor nodded and scurried off. Franklin turned back to the agent at the desk. The same young man who had smirked earlier. What was your reason for calling security?" She wouldn't stand down. She asked why her seat was changed. "Yes, but did she shout?" "No." "Did she threaten anyone?" "No." Franklin leaned in. "Just enough. You do understand that what you did is considered targeted escalation. Correct that security was called without cause, that her ID was ignored, that you detained a federal official without probable suspicion." The agent swallowed. "I didn't know who she was." Franklin didn't blink. It shouldn't matter. There was a silence so thick it hummed. One of the passengers who had been watching earlier walked by the hallway, saw what was happening and pulled out her phone again. Word was spreading. Another agent walked in. The one who had missed everything earlier. He saw Franklin, the badge, the stare from Jasmine. He whispered something to the supervisor. Then the apologies began. "Ma'am, we deeply regret the—" "No," Franklin interrupted. "She doesn't need an apology. She needed dignity. 20 minutes ago." The supervisor looked flustered. "We'd like to offer rebooking first-class seat next flight." Jasmine shook her head. "He's not trying to get me a better seat. He's trying to get you to realize you don't get to treat people like that." "Not me, not anyone." But by then, the moment they should have cared about had already passed. Franklin didn't raise his voice. He never had to. His tone was clipped, but calm, the kind of calm that filled a room with tension. You could almost see it settle over the space like dust, quiet but impossible to ignore. The gate manager arrived moments later, out of breath, carrying a clipboard and a look that said he was already in damage control mode. His eyes darted between the TSA officers, the airline staff, and the couple standing side by side, like a wall that wasn't about to budge. Judge Rhodes, Congresswoman Crockett. "I'm save it?" Franklin said. "We're not interested in your introductions. I want a name." The manager blinked. "Excuse me, the name of the person who made the call to security. The one who decided my wife was a problem for asking about her boarding pass." The manager hesitated. "That's a personnel matter." Franklin stepped forward just enough to close the space. "So is discrimination." His voice didn't need to climb. The manager looked at Jasmine, then back to Franklin. He shifted his weight. "I understand this is a serious concern. We're reviewing." "No, you're not." Franklin cut in again. "You're scrambling." The TSA officers were now standing in the background, silent. The young agent who dismissed Jasmine earlier had vanished, likely hiding somewhere down the terminal, avoiding whatever this was about to turn into. Jasmine didn't say a word. She stood there, arms crossed loosely in front of her. Her silence was deliberate. Now she was watching how it all played out. And she wasn't going to help them soften the blow. Franklin continued, "You allowed your staff to escalate a non-confrontation into a security incident. You ignored federal credentials. You detained a sitting congresswoman, obstructing her travel without a single legal basis. All because someone didn't like being questioned." The gate manager swallowed hard. "I'll speak with my regional supervisor." "You'll do more than that." I promise. Judge Rhodes will launch a full internal review. Jasmine finally spoke, quiet, sharp. Don't launch it because he's here. You should have launched it the moment I was pulled. The room stayed still for a beat. You could hear the intercom overhead, calling boarding for another flight. Some other gate, some other crowd, but right here things had stopped. Franklin looked down at his watch. You've cost her a funeral that can't be fixed, but you will issue a public apology, not just to her, but to everyone you've done this to, and didn't think twice about the gate manager opened his mouth, but thought better of it. Jasmine looked him in the eye. And no, you don't get to reframe this. Don't spin it like there was confusion. This was judgment plain and loud. More passengers had gathered near the area. Now a man with a baseball cap stood watching from the edge. A middle-aged woman whispered to her husband and pointed toward the couple. Another person younger, maybe early 20s, sat on the floor near a charging station and typed fast on their phone. The story was already leaving the terminal. Jasmine adjusted the strap on her shoulder and turned to Franklin. Let's go. You sure? Yeah, she said. There's nothing left here for them to explain. They walked toward the exit without looking back. No security escort, no hasty employees following them with nervous smiles, no free vouchers, no first-class upgrade, just silence. And behind them, a wave of regret. None of those people had expected to feel that morning. But what came after they walked out would be bigger than anything inside those walls. By the time Jasmine and Franklin reached the parking lot, her phone had already begun buzzing with missed calls and unread messages. She ignored them all, her fingers curled around the handle of her suitcase. But she wasn't walking toward the car just yet. She needed air, not just oxygen space to cool the fire crawling up her chest. Franklin stood beside her calm, as always, watching the terminal doors like they still owed him an answer. They didn't expect me to show up, he finally said, voice low. They didn't expect anyone to care, Jasmine replied. He glanced at her. You okay? She nodded, but it was one of those nods that carried weight. Not the kind that meant yes, the kind that meant, I'll be okay later, inside the terminal. The ripple had already begun. Videos were online. One caught the exact moment Jasmine had been walked out of the gate area, her head high, arms by her sides, surrounded by officers who wouldn't meet her gaze. Another clip showed Franklin demanding names. It was spreading faster than any apology could catch up in a small break room near the back of the Southwest office. The young gate agent sat slumped in a chair. His name tag read, Cullen. His hands were clasped tightly, staring down at the floor. The manager stood by the door, arms folded. You could have just moved her to a new seat, the manager said quietly. That's all she asked. I didn't know who she was. Colin muttered. You don't get to treat people like that, whether you know them or not. I thought she was being difficult. She asked a question. That's not a crime. Colin didn't respond. He didn't need to. The weight of it was sinking in now. Not just that. He'd messed up, but that everyone had seen it. That the face he rolled his eyes at belonged to someone who knew how power worked. Because she'd earned hers, without ever raising her voice. And now people were watching every misstep, every word. Outside, Franklin leaned on the back of their car, while Jasmine stood near the trunk, finally reading the messages on her phone. One from a staffer in D.C. said a journalist had already reached out, another from her aunt in Jackson. He would have been proud of you. Jazz, don't let them make you small. Jasmine took a deep breath. They'll try to spin this. They can try, Franklin said, but it's already public. I just wanted to go to a funeral. I know, a long pause. She looked up at him. Did I handle it right? Franklin tilted his head. You didn't give them what they wanted. That's more than most people could have done. It wasn't just about being right. It was about being human and watching that humanity get ignored like it meant nothing. Inside, the airline's regional supervisor had joined the scene. Statements were being taken. Damage control teams had already begun crafting language that sounded remorseful, without admitting liability. That line the one big companies never cross, but something about this wasn't going away. It wasn't just about Jasmine. People saw their own mothers, sisters' wives in that video. They recognized the tone, the dismissal, the look that said, "You don't belong here, even when everything in your hand says you do." And they were angry. Apologies came first internally. Then on social media, the airline released a short statement. Hours later, "We regret the incident involving Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and are reviewing our procedures to ensure every customer is treated with respect and professionalism." No names, no real ownership. But that didn't matter anymore, because respect shouldn't be situational and dignity doesn't require a title. But this story wasn't over. Not for the people watching, and not for the ones quietly remembering moments when they were treated just the same. Later that evening, Jasmine sat on the edge of a hotel bed in Jackson, staring at the untouched plate of room service beside her. Franklin had gone downstairs to make a few phone calls. The memorial had already ended. Her family sent her pictures. They tried not to sound disappointed, but Jasmine could hear it anyway in the gaps between words in the silence. "After we missed you," she scrolled through the news on her phone, headlines everywhere. Congresswoman Crockett removed from flight after dispute at gate TSA and airline under fire after detaining federal official without cause. Passengers' footage sparks public outrage. Jasmine didn't want to read them. She lived it. She didn't need someone else's version, but the part she didn't expect. The part that caught her throat were the comments. Not just the anger, though there was plenty of that. It was the recognition. People sharing their own stories, school teachers, nurses, military veterans, elderly passengers, all of them describing moments when they were pulled aside, questioned, treated like problems for simply existing in the wrong line or asking the wrong question. A woman from Arizona wrote, "I didn't have a title, so they talked to me like I was nothing. I didn't fight back. I just cried in the bathroom." A man from Oakland posted, "The way they handled her is the way they handled my father. He missed his heart surgery. No one apologized." It went on and on. Jasmine felt something catch in her chest. This wasn't just about what had happened at Gate 22. It was about something older, something far more common. Franklin walked in a few minutes later, set his phone down on the desk. "You're everywhere," he said. I know he looked at her for a moment. "You want to talk about it?" She shook her head. "Not yet." He sat beside her. "You did the right thing, even when they didn't." Jasmine looked over at the window. The city outside was still streetlights humming, cars passing in slow intervals. "They treated me like I was invisible," she said finally, "like I didn't belong, even when I showed them who I was." Franklin nodded. "You think they'll learn from it?" "I don't know," she said, "but maybe someone else will. Because that's the thing about moments like these, they stick. Not always for the people who cause them, but for the people who live through them. And for the people watching. Remembering, realizing this has happened to me too." Later that week, Jasmine returned to D.C. She declined the morning news interviews. She didn't want her face turned into a symbol. She wanted a conversation, not a spectacle. Instead, she wrote a letter, one that got published in several newspapers in it. She wrote, "This isn't just about one gate or one airline. It's about how quickly some people in power forget the basic rules of human decency, about how easily someone's voice can be dismissed when it doesn't come wrapped in privilege or pedigree, and it's about how dignity is not something that should be given based on recognition. It should be automatic every single time that line was quoted more than any other." The airline eventually issued a longer apology, one that named her directly, but by then the public had already written their own version of the story, one where Jasmine Crockett wasn't just a congresswoman. She was a stand-in for every person who's been overlooked, silenced, or pushed to the side, like their voice didn't carry weight, And she didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She stood still and let the world see what it really looks like, when someone who deserves better is treated like they don't matter. But the final message wasn't hers alone. It belonged to everyone who'd been quietly waiting for someone to speak up when no one else did a week later. Jasmine Crockett sat alone on a bench outside Union Station in Washington, D.C. She had just finished a meeting with a group of young interns working on civil rights policy. They didn't ask her about committees or legislation. They asked about the airport. One of them, a 19-year-old from Kansas named Talia, said quietly, "I saw the video. I've been treated like that before." I didn't know what to say when it happened. You didn't say much either. But you made it loud. That stayed with Jasmine, because sometimes the moment doesn't call for noise. It calls for stillness. A kind of stillness that forces the world to look at what it's doing. She thought back to the look on that gate agent's face when Franklin asked for his name. The silence that followed the realization that he hadn't just disrespected a passenger. He had exposed himself not to a title, but to a truth he probably wasn't ready to see. She remembered what Franklin told her the night they got back to their home in Fort Worth. Most people think power comes with a badge or a desk, but real power is when you know who you are, and no one can take that away, even if they try. That had been the lesson all along, not just for the airline, for everyone watching. Because the truth is, this wasn't an isolated story. This was just the one that got caught on camera, the one that featured someone with a title, a platform, a voice too loud to ignore. But what about the ones who aren't in Congress? What about the woman trying to get to her daughter's graduation, the man flying across the country for a job interview, the grandmother going home to bury her brother? What happens when they get dismissed? Franklin was right. It should never take a title for someone to be treated with basic human decency. Jasmine leaned back on the bench, watching people rush past with coffee cups, briefcases, earbuds in, heads down, everyone trying to get somewhere, everyone hoping the world doesn't stop them just for being themselves. She picked up her phone and drafted one more message to her staff. It read, "Next town hall we open with a story, not about politics, about people, about what happened at Gate 22. Because stories matter. Not for the drama, not for the headlines, but because they hold up a mirror and force us to ask, if that had been me, what would I have done? Or more importantly, if I had been the one in power, how would I have treated her?" The lesson wasn't about shame. It was about awareness and the reminder that dignity isn't a reward. It's a right. So to anyone who's ever been talked down to, brushed off, pushed aside, to anyone who's ever had to prove they belong in a place they already paid to be in, to anyone who's ever swallowed their words because they were afraid their tone might be used against them, your story matters. And one day, someone will speak it with or without a camera watching. So the next time you're in line at a counter or behind a desk, look people in the eye, listen. Don't assume. Because how we treat people when no one's watching says everything about who we are. When everyone is, if this story made you feel something, anger, empathy, recognition, then share it. Don't let it stay a headline. Let it be a reminder. And if you want more real stories like this, stories that reveal, reflect, and remind us what respect looks like,